All right, ladies and gentlemen, you are welcome to another episode on The Truth with Ben Jokes, your number one political talk show. TINUBU continues in his schemes to win the Southeast over, saying that the North is conspiring seriously against him. Look at this. NEL Fund calls on Southeast South to increase participation in student loan. From all the propaganda by Ben Kalu to Tinubu's planned visit to Anambra on Thursday, and now this. Well, do I need to repeat myself on this student loan matter? I am yet to see anyone who has received it. For me, it is clearly a scam. Even ICPC came out to say that out of the 100 billion naira that was released for disbursement, 71.2 billion has been stolen. So it is clearly a scam. If you apply with all your personal information like name, state of origin certificate, admission letter, matric number, etc., they will just turn around and say you have received it since they have all your details, but you won't receive the money. Then they will package all the Igbo names and say Tinubu has given Igbo student loan, so they are now supposed to vote for him. Meanwhile, you saw nothing. Please save yourselves the heartbreak and the embarrassment. Don't trust this government on anything. The whole thing you are seeing on TV is just a charade. So Southeast and South students, save yourselves the stress and the disappointment. This government is a total failure, the worst we have ever had, to the point that the entire world is now warning Nigeria against Tinubu. Since Tinubu intensified his 2027 bid, international organizations have been giving Nigerians reasons why they should get rid of him, from IMF to World Bank to UNICEF. And just few hours ago, another international organization released a short documentary on the Tinubu administration. This, without doubt, is the worst submission on this government so far. They actually proved in this documentary with numbers that the Tinubu regime is the worst since 1960. Yes, you heard right, since 1960. And at the end of the documentary, it became clear that the world leaders and organizations can see that Nigeria will crumble totally if Tinubu is allowed beyond 2027. Before I show you details of this documentary and how Nigerians reacted, let me quickly show you this video. APC's National Publicity Secretary, Felix Moka, in this interview was defending the Tinubu regime. He sounded very smart, but when I respond to his defense after this video, you will see his foolishness in broad daylight. Watch the video.
First of all, that the premise of your question is not based on economics. It's based on simply anecdotes. It's based on people. Hakim Baba Ahmed did not make an economic argument. He didn't. I don't think he suggested that it was when he made those conclusions. You see, it's easy to draw conclusions. You can conclude anything you want.
Probably you haven't read his statement, or you didn't listen to the interview.
Listen, the interview on Arise
on Channel TV. Yes.
I listened to it from the beginning to the end. Actually, as a matter of fact, I listened to it twice. So there's nothing he said that I missed. And so my response is, a full thoughtful reaction to his interview. I didn't miss a word he said. I listened very carefully. But he didn't make an economic argument. I want to double down on that. I mean, you can go back and listen to him. Simply suggesting that things are worse under this administration in comparison with the former administration is not an economic argument. That's a statement of opinion. That's, if you interview 1 million people, you might as well get 1 million, opinions on that question about conclusion. Conclusion is not economics. Economics is economics. It's a process, and it's based often on facts and, projections.
So are you denying that inflation is higher? Talking about economic argument, so are you denying that inflation is higher?
Let me tell you why I tell you it's not an economic argument. When you ask the question the way you're asking, that doesn't make it an economic argument. I'll tell you why. We just, in the last frame of question that, Howard asked, I just said to you that this government embarked upon deep, far-reaching policy reforms. For example, floated the naira. If the naira was floated as against a previously dictated value of the naira, you don't expect everything to be where it was prior to that, floating of the naira. So your question is not taking into account that reality, that Naira was, fixed at a particular value, and this government came along in line with, I think, the best economic wisdom, decided that we must float the Naira in order for the Naira to become more competitive, and then take out the fuel subsidy that was, a hemorrhage to the economy. The economy was bleeding needlessly. Everybody agreed that the subsidy system was, in fact, some people said it was fraudulent. But look, the point is that when you take out fuel subsidy regime that was at the key, at the core of the economic, system, and you float the Naira, two twin massive economic, uptake, you don't expect the fundamentals, whether it's of inflation or anything else, to be the same. But question is, are those systems, or interventions, are they meant to produce, the overall good down the road? The answer is clearly yes. In the short term, are there supposed to be, consequences, repercussions for those twin policy shifts? The answer is definitely yes. And that's what we're dealing with. So when you make a leap in logic and say that because, inflation was X and now it's this, without factoring this massive economic, transformation that is going on, then that is not economics. Hakim Baba Ahmed is not discussing economics. He's discussing his personal opinion.
You heard that. Now, Hakim Baba Ahmed said this government is worse than the previous one, and Felix Moka has reduced his entire defense to the removal of fuel subsidy and the floating of the Naira, stating that those reforms are the reasons why we are going through what we are going through today. But like I keep saying, it is not just about the reforms. How about the things that you promised would happen after you carried out the reforms? When you removed fuel subsidy, what you said was that we needed to save money to invest in critical infrastructure. Secondly, you said we needed to save money so that we will stop taking numerous loans. We will have our own money to use to run the country. But what do we have today? By the 29th of this month, TINUBU will be exactly 2 years in office. We don't have any infrastructure to point at. Secondly, TINUBU has borrowed more in 2 years than Buhari's 5 years. Wale Edun was asked at the National Assembly to give account of subsidy removal savings, and he asked for a closed-door meeting without the press. He couldn't even face Nigeria to tell us what they did with the subsidy savings. So Buhari was paying, say, 2 trillion naira as subsidy, and that enabled us to buy petrol at 195 naira per litre. Then TINUBU came in and removed that 2 trillion naira, claiming to save it for infrastructure. Today, we can't see infrastructure, we can't see the 2 trillion, and we are now buying petrol at 1,000 naira per litre. Doesn't that make Buhari 10 times better than him? And Felix Moka sat there and had the nerves to lie about floating the Naira. He has forgotten that CBN has already exposed this regime in that regard. TINUBU is no longer floating the Naira. In fact, he is spending 3 times more than Buhari spent to keep exchange rate at 750 naira to a dollar. Yet, exchange rate has still exceeded 1,500 naira to a dollar. But Felix Moka sat there lying to Charles because Charles didn't do proper findings on those 2 policies that they always brag about. This administration has failed totally, and Felix Moka and co will continue looking stupid and sounding dumb trying to defend it. Now, let us look at the top story. This is like a mini documentary on the TINUBU regime. African Development Bank, led by Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, has established with numbers that TINUBU is the worst thing to have happened to this country since 1960. Please sit down comfortably and listen attentively as you watch this video. Take a look.
Nigeria's economic landscape has reached a concerning milestone, with its gross domestic product, GDP per capita, dropping to $824 in 2025, a figure lower than the levels recorded in 1960. This alarming development was highlighted by African Development Bank President Akinwumi Adesina, underscoring the nation's deepening economic challenges. According to data from the International Monetary Fund, IMF, Nigeria's GDP per capita has experienced a significant decline over the past decade, falling from approximately $3,223 in 2014 to $835.49 in 2025. This represents a staggering 74% decrease, positioning Nigeria among the lowest in per capita income within sub-Saharan Africa. The World Bank's records indicate that in 1960, Nigeria's GDP per capita was around $93.04, while the current figure of $824 is higher in nominal terms. When adjusted for inflation and purchasing power, it reflects a regression in the average Nigerian's economic well-being compared to the post-independence era. Several factors that contributed to this downturn include currency depreciation, where the Nigerian naira has seen a significant devaluation, with the exchange rate plummeting from 150 naira per US dollar in 2013 to approximately 1,500 in 2025. Also inflation, where the country is grappling with high inflation rates, reaching a near three-decade peak of 34.8% in December 2024, eroding purchasing power of its citizens. Another factor includes economic mismanagement, where policy missteps and structural inefficiencies have hindered economic growth, leading to reduced productivity and increased unemployment. Comparatively, neighboring countries like Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire have higher GDP per capita figures, standing at $2,190 and $2,900 respectively, highlighting Nigeria's relative economic decline in the region.
Wow, you heard that. You must have thought it was a joke or an exaggeration when I said it, but you just heard it yourself. African Development Bank's report on the TINUBU regime. Our GDP is lower today than what it was in 1960. Per capita income dropped from $3,223 in 2014 under Jonathan to $835.49 today in 2025. A 74% decrease, and now we have one of the lowest per capita income figure in sub-Saharan Africa. And they said the per capita income in 1960, which was $93, if we trace it back, is higher than what it is today. Now, anyone who has been following Dr. Akinwumi Adesina's career would know that he's a very brilliant man, one of the best ministers this country has ever had. What he achieved as a minister, Tinubu can never achieve half. As a matter of fact, it is some of Adesina's achievements that this administration is destroying today. But instead of learning from this submission that he has made, Bayo Ononuga decided to attack him after this mini documentary was released. And out of nowhere, while attacking Adesina, he brought in the name of Peter Obi. Look at how the papers reported it. Tinubu Presidency rejects African Development Bank President Adesina's Nigeria better off in 1960s claim, says he sounded like Peter Obi. Bola Tinubu has dismissed recent claims by African Development Bank President Dr. Akinwumi Adesina that Nigerians are economically worse off today than they were in 1960 when the country gained independence. In a rebuttal issued Sunday night by Bayo Ononuga, spokesperson for Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the presidency said that Adesina spoke like a politician in the mode of Peter Obi and did not do due diligence before making his unverifiable statement. It accused the outgoing African Development Bank president of failing to conduct thorough research and relying on faulty statistics. If Bayo Ononuga knew who Akinwumi Adesina was, I don't think he would have said this. But I am happy that you said, Bayo Ononuga, that Akinwumi Adesina sounded like Peter Obi, because Dr. Akinwumi is one of the most brilliant scholars in Africa as it stands today. That was why he was an overwhelming favorite for the position of the president of the African Development Bank twice. He didn't have to rig or bribe judiciary. Those are the kind of brains that you can compare to Peter Obi's brain. Who is in your camp, that APC camp, that you can say that Akinwumi Adesina sounds like or sounded like who? So you see, you were trying to throw a jab, but at the end of the day, you exalted His Excellency Peter Obi and even Akinwumi Adesina, because you have no right to be in a conversation with somebody as eminent as Dr. Akinwumi Adesina. Brain-wise, integrity-wise, name it. Meanwhile, the Akinwumi Adesina that Bayo Ononuga is trying to denigrate is 65 years old, and he has been African Development Bank president for 2 terms. Bayo Ononuga said he's 67 years old, even though we know he's about 84 or 96, but he said he's 67 years old and he's still an errand boy to Bulaba. You are an errand boy to Bulaba and you want to talk back at African Development Bank two-time president. What a joke. Now, all these figures and reports popping in from the World Bank, from the IMF, from the UNICEF, now African Development Bank, telling Nigerians how despicable the TINUBU regime has been, for me, are warnings to Nigerians to ensure that this guy does not continue in office, because we have never had it like this. Almost every day, one report must drop in almost 2 weeks now, telling us how poverty is going to be worse in 2027, the evil things that have happened to the treasury, to the economy, and all that. So this is a wake-up call to Nigerians to do all they can to ensure that the APC is kicked out of Aso Rock. Anyway, make I leave am here. Make I still enter town. Make I go get some ogbonge political news wey una go like. Why? Because of una. Now I dey here, so don't go away. Don't go